you see any other trends coming in the future for education in particular?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think trends, I always think, oh, like the hot ones, like, yeah, virtual reality,
Oh my God,
VR.
yes.
Or...
Yes, augmented
Just
reality,
piqued your
virtual
interest
reality,
right there.
metaverse. Yes,
Yeah,
completely agree on
like,
that.
we're totally there.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Unfuck the Internet. Today it's here, me, Ian, and Raeanne Lee. She's an educational consultant and digital storyteller. Hi, Raeanne.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, Ian. Thanks for having me.
It's very nice to have you here.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's
great. I
very
mean,
great.
I love the concept of your podcast, and I mean, tech intersects so many things, and love talking about it. So great.
It does. Yeah. It's very nice to have you here. And so you're an educational consultant, right? So what do you do exactly?
Well, my facetious answer that I'd say is that I consult in education, but I know that doesn't really say very much. But what I can say is that my discipline really trains people how to deliver learning experiences from like the whole end-to-end process. So it's a real production role as well, and it also involves cognitive science and adult learning theories and principles. So it's really a meld of all that. I come from a industry, well, I come from higher ed, really, and that's where I kind of got my start in educational consulting. And there I used to joke that, you know, you'd have these professors that would be sitting in a classroom and that would be used to, you know, telling or lecturing in front of 100-person theater, but really it doesn't reach anyone beyond the first row because of the way that they've been telling their stories. That they've been telling that it's all about storytelling, as I said. So it's really kind of training that professor who is at the top of their field, or that subject matter expert who is at the top of their field, their expertise, and training them on how to deliver content in a way that is engaging, useful, and will be retentive for learners.
That's very interesting. So basically, like, you're designing like courses that they have to make, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so a lot of my experience comes in like the e-learning part of it. And I think you can't really talk about instructional design these days without talking about e-learning, because a lot of learning now is dispensed through the internet online. So I specifically, a lot of my experience comes from MOOC production. And we kind of joked about this before because MOOC spelled MOOC, which, what is that? It's massively open online courses. So we're talking about things like Coursera, like edX, like yeah, Future Learn is one in the UK that a lot of universities here are using now. And it's really about that open education and democratizing education for everyone.
So actually I have been like attending some courses on Coursera. And then I'm like guessing that all the courses that I made, they were designed by someone else, which was not the professor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh
so a lot of universities will have they'll have their own faculty learning design team, or they'll have a central learning design team that will assist them in you know, all the good bits like syllabus creation, logistics, assessment creation, making sure that learning is stacked and it uses all of the best learning theories. So one of the learning theories out of many is something called micro learning. So that's really about chunking learning in small parts and make it easier for people to parse out. So they'll look at the massive lecture notes or the massive information that a lecturer has, and they'll try to parse it out in a way that is that really relies on all of these adult learning theories like scaffolding as well. That's a concept of taking learning and building upon it in like tangible steps. So you're continuing to, you can imagine like a scaffolding, you're continuing to build upon something through the entire course of the learning. So it really has, a lecturer can sometimes, or a subject matter expert can kind of be narrow focused in what their expertise may be. And the learning designer's job is to kind of step in and see what the path is from start to finish, and what is the best way to achieve those learning outcomes or goals that were set out.
But I see. Then I have one question, because I recently attended like a course on cryptocurrencies on Coursera, and now I'm like, I'm thinking, so this course was actually written by somebody else, which can be like an external consultant, as you said. But does this external consultant write the entire script? Like, what is the level of knowledge that a consultant has to have on the matter? Because how can you design a course if you don't know anything about cryptocurrency, or I don't know, like the blockchain industry or whatever that is? You know, you have to learn something before getting to it, like from the broader to the narrow and stuff like that. How do you do it?
Oh, completely. I mean, like, that's one of the more interesting parts about this role, is that depending where you are, you constantly just get to learn new things about whatever course that you're delivering on. But I mean, you're right, you can't just kind of expect to step into this position in teaching a course or designing the teaching and learning of a course and become an expert. You're not supposed to be an expert. It would take too long and it would be pretty inefficient. I suppose the job then is to know what kinds of questions to ask. So the instructor or the subject matter expert would be able to answer those questions, and then you can have like that lateral understanding back and forth, and then you would be able to know enough to split up their expertise into tangible blocks of information that you'd then be able to use. So if you're looking at like script writing is definitely something that instructional designers do. But a lot of instructors or subject matter experts will balk at someone else writing their scripts for them, right? They'll say like, I'm the expert in this, I don't want you to touch what I'm doing, and that is totally fine. As an instructional designer, you're also supposed to be like shepherding that subject matter expert into the delivery of their content in the best possible way. So a lot of instructors are not used to presenting, especially in front of a camera, because something about that camera, once it goes on, they just go blank. So there are a lot of different production-esque methods. So it's also my job specifically would meld a lot of kind of video production techniques as well to get that presenter to be comfortable, whether it is through a script with a teleprompter or something that is more storyboarded. At the very least, you need to have a storyboard so you know what to expect and you know what to design the learning around.
That's very, very interesting. Okay. I didn't know there was such a long study behind it. Sorry, Ian.
Yeah. So it's very much, it's not one size fits all. It's very specific to the instructor or to the expert on hand of how the courses or the materials can be presented.
Totally. And there are a lot of different, like I said, methodologies or theories that you can use to guide them. So there are what you call, one of the big ones is Gagne's 9 events of instruction, and they basically list like the 9 different things that need to happen for learning to occur. And it's kind of split into the preparation of learning. So you're really priming that student to get their attention, and then kind of list the objectives, and then the actual instruction and the practice where you're kind of delivering the content and reinforcing it. And then at the end of that is the assessment and transfer. So that would be really assessing the performance. How have they kind of taken in that information, and how would they then be reproducing that in a way to transfer to other applications. And so these 3 events need to happen. Three categories of events need to be happen. There are 9, which I could list off, but I won't. And it's really about making sure that within these many kinds of frameworks, that you can take the expertise from that subject matter expert and then try to format it so that it follows these best practices.
Okay. Is there do the best practices change, or do the deliverables change depending on the audience, or is it very much we try and focus on the majority of learners out there?
So a lot of the learning or the instruction that I do is based on adult learning principles, and there are a couple. Repetition for one, or I mean, there are some other multimedia theories that say, oh yeah, repetition is good, and some others that say that, oh, adults don't need repetition because it confuses them. But again, that
I mean, we're repeating it a lot.
There are contrasting theories, but that is completely different for someone that would be in K-12 learning, right? And I have a couple of friends, I think I mentioned before the call, that are K-12 instructors, teachers, or learning psychologists, and younger people learn differently. I mean, we're all people, so there are obviously similarities, but the ways in which you would have to adapt your teaching for them, for instance, you might need to focus more on engagement rather than the assessment and transfer of abilities would be yeah, one of the big differences in it's kind of like, what can you trust adults to do if you are, once you're in, for instance, in university, right? The teaching learning is different because it's less about trying to get them on board in the material. Like, the kind of this base assumption is that you're already there to learn. So we still need to engage you up to a certain point, but there's kind of less of a focus on that. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert in child K-12 learning, but I think there are some other differences there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like there must be different techniques if you like teach either to a higher school or like to a company or to, like, I don't know, kindergarten or whatever that is. If you even teach in kindergarten, yeah. If you know what I mean, right?
Class, let's turn to our picture books. It's like we're in university, and they're like, what?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, like, it's all about communication and meeting that demographic where they are. So if you're teaching a class on intercultural behavior as well, you might need to respond to them, or you might need to meet them at a different place than you would if they were from that culture. So just considering different learning points of view, there's a kind of tool that we use. It's called learner personas, where it's kind of like market segmentation really, but you're looking at all the different possible people that might be taking your course and developing a learner persona for them, and then seeing where might their challenges be in understanding your material, where would they have difficulty, and then trying to address as many of those as you can. And then, like, a good rule of thumb is to create at least a couple of those learner personas so you can cover a wider base.
I had no clue there was such a long study behind it. This isn't like a marketing study. This is something that I do like when I work. Right. I really had no clue about it. Like, you could analyze your audience and just like try to address them the best way possible.
It sounds like Raeanne has like analyzed us and addressed her responses.
Just taking notes right now.
Take out your notes. So, like you were saying before, you were talking about the education, but I guess this could also be applied to companies, right?
Yeah, definitely. So again, I come from a higher ed background, and I know a lot of institutions that, a lot of people that have made that switch, that transition over from higher ed into whatever learning or training industries there are within corporate institutions. And there's a kind of big cultural difference in terms of how universities run, or higher education institutions run. They're really, I was going to say they're really old, but they are really they're really old, and they are steeped in all this tradition and process, and you're really beholden, for instance, to the faculties, right? And a lot of different processes that you need to go through before something is approved. Like, for instance, you might need to take something all the way up to Senate. So in terms of like the types of innovation and change that you can make within the university system, it's more limited, I would say, than perhaps kind of the change that you would be able to make in a corporation, which, you know, they would be more willing to kind of throw money at the wall as long as you're seeing results.
Okay.
So
especially if they involve like, you know, kind of governance projects.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because this is like needed for them.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the timing of the cycles work differently as well, right? Everything within a corporate, it goes to the financial year, within the quarters, and it's much faster in terms of the turnover and what kind of deliverables you might need to make. Whereas, like, you know, within a university, it would be a multi-year long project. And obviously there is the capacity for these longer term projects within corporations, but it's really about these more short-term deliverables. So the pace is it's much faster as well. And I would say that there are pros and cons to working in both. I do miss higher ed in some ways, but I think as a younger person at the start of my career-ish, or start or middle of my career, it's exciting to be in a space that can move quickly.
Yeah, especially like in the corporate section. This is like fast-paced, right?
Right, exactly.
It's crazily fast-paced. So I think like you have to deliver immediately. You get assigned a job, and then you gotta work about it. Like you gotta work on it like for 1 week, and then you gotta deliver it. So it's crazy, like super fast.
Constantly moving, constantly.
Yes. So, but you also learn a lot about this, like how the corporate works, and how the process is reassessed, how the people are reassigned to other, you know, fields and stuff. So I think that's really interesting as well.
So I think there's a lot of capacity to move outside of just like learning and teaching within a corporation or within industry, and be able to move around and kind of like dip your being a person that is interested in teaching and learning. It gives you a lot of excuses to, you know, learn about the other functions of your organization.
What is like the most interesting thing that you have learned from doing this?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Right?
We ask only hard-hitting questions on this podcast.
What's the most interesting thing? There are a lot of interesting things. I think it's what I find really interesting is people and how they respond to the role that I have to play. And because I think being a learning consultant, you're doing a lot of question asking and a lot of listening. And of course you like record and then you put out a deliverable later. But I think it's been given me an opportunity to figure out kind of like those like little political intrigues of an organization more quickly than I would in any other position, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. Is there like a specific movement that you see? Is there a specific shift within industries that you can identify?
Specific shift, I guess. So I'm an educational consultant, or the field is called Instructional Design, which is designing the instruction. But one of the more kind of movements, I guess, is this movement into learner experience. And what does that look like, or being a learner experience designer? And therefore it's less top-down instruction and more bottom up, I suppose.
With like hands-on?
Yeah, I'd say hands-on. So there's this kind of another theory, it's called like the 70-20-10 theory. Learning theory, you might have heard of it.
Right.
No, I think I didn't.
It's basically that 70% of 10% of all learning is more formal, and then 20% of learning is more informal, kind of tacit training, and then 70% is like on the job. So that's if you're kind of thinking about like, oh, what was that? Malcolm Gladwell, was it Malcolm Gladwell? The guy that was like, oh yeah, you need 10,000 hours to be an expert in this or that. Not sure. But if you think about those 10,000 hours, I think you would say that, 70% of that would be actually practicing that discipline rather than like reading in a textbook or learning theory about it, which kind of like brings the question of, oh, what is then the place of instructional design, given that that only covers 10% or 10% of the entire learning cycle. So there's been this kind of movement, and that's kind of like also, oh, what do universities do? Are they actually teaching? Or then you can start to see like a lot of universities moving into more active learning or more experiential learning, where they're actually, being able to practice more. And I think that's where a lot of really fun tech comes into play as well, because obviously if you're working in healthcare or you're working in the medical sector, it's literally kind of like a life or death situation if you're learning. And if you're learning with real people, that can be kind of unethical. So that's where simulations would come in, to be able to practice in simulations, and that's low risk there. But yeah, I think that is a thought that's starting to scare a lot of people, a lot of universities especially, and a lot of people within my profession, because they need to start considering the entire pipeline of managing the learning experience post when the instruction is delivered.
What does affect, say, like how the technologies are delivered in the industry or through education?
Totally. So I, being an online e-learning educational consultant, instructional designer, we all recognize that a lot of learning instruction does have to be delivered on the computer or through some kind of tech assisted help, right? So what we put the learning into is usually called a learning management system. And that's your very basic platform to be able to manage that top-down learning.
I see.
Right.
So who is the provider of the platform?
There are a lot of different LMS vendors. So within the university systems, there are like the big players are Brightspace or D2L. That's
Desire to Learn,
right. One. And then we have Canvas and Blackboard. And Canvas and Blackboard, I would say, are the big ones. And then you have open source ones as well, like Moodle. Moodle's been around for a really long time. And I'm a huge proponent of Open edX. So that is the LMS that was developed from edX. So a big piece of learning tech news, but not learning news, by the way, was that edX was sold. It used to be a nonprofit, so it used to be an organization, and it was sold to 2U. So 2U is also another higher ed corporate that delivers on. Sorry,
I'm just like 2U, and I'm like, I didn't buy it. What do you say?
2U.
Got it. Gotcha.
How many names?
You. And that made big news, but I won't talk about it now. I really do like the Open edX platform. Basically, once they made that sale, the money from that went to funding the development. This very open source tool, and a lot of people have done really cool things with it as well. So I really appreciate that. But talking about learning experience, kind of like backpedaling a bit. Now there are different types of learning systems on the market that have come up and said, hey, LMSs aren't good enough for all of the things I just said about instruction. What we really need to be doing is meeting the learners where they're at. So there comes the LXP, or the Learning Experience Platform. And one of the big players right now is Degreed. They've put a lot of money, like a lot of these LXPs claim to have like AI that helps them create personalized learning pathways for their learners.
So they make, wait, the AI makes learning content.
Well, it's more the curation, say.
Okay, so it's not the content itself, it's just like the way this is adapted, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you remember what I said about like micro learning, or chunking experiences, a lot of learning now is dispensed through chunkable units. So I think LinkedIn really has like taken that to heart, because they're saying that, hey, we're not a university, we're not going to be able to teach like a 3-credit course within this session, but like when you're on the treadmill and you want to learn about like productivity, why don't you check out our like 5-minute video out of this 1-hour course? And LinkedIn Learning, they're also coming out with their own LXP, by the way. They'll say that, instead of like taking this whole course, we'll take like this one video, maybe like 2 minutes from this video, and then link it to another video, and that will in effect curate a whole different system of learning with its own like scaffolding kind of inbuilt. And it's obviously not perfect if you'd spend like a lot more time and resources for a person to do it, but technology is getting better. So that's I think the direction in which these LXPs want to go in. Although I will say that like the contention that I do have with LXPs calling themselves LXPs, it's still not, they claim to take up that 70, 20, 10, the whole kind of spectrum of learning. I would still say that they're only doing like the additional 20% and like maybe parts of like that 70% on the job, because it's never truly being able to capture everything that's happening.
Yeah,
unless they get like a smart AI where they're like, okay, we're gonna pause the video now as we get industry specific examples for every single one of you.
We know that like AI is not that smart.
Everything on your computer, we're going to track all of your movement and every email that you send, and like based on this we're gonna
press like, 1 now if you work for Coca-Cola, and press 2 if you work for
I mean, that's the thing. For it to be like truly adaptive, they're going to have to need to like get a lot more information from users, which like borders on the territory of being kind of sketchy and invasive. But,
ooh. Is that so kind of besides the education moving to smaller, more manageable bites, do you see any other trends coming in the future for education in particular?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think trends, I always think, like the hot ones, like virtual reality, VR.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, augmented reality, virtual reality,
right
metaverse. There. Yes, completely agree on that.
We're totally there. And so we talked about healthcare before. Like the virtual reality in that situation would be really useful for dealing with patients, or being within a hospital setting, or if you're an engineer, kind of like passing through different parts that you'd need to actually physically move around, that you wouldn't perhaps like get access to, or it would be too expensive for you to screw up. So I think a lot of institutions with a lot of money are like exploring that in a way that is interesting and not just hokey. Because I think when it first started coming out at the beginning, everyone was like, oh yeah, this is really cool, but attaching it to actual like evidence-based learning or like outcomes was difficult, because it was just kind of cool tech. But now they're in, like doing more of those application-based studies. So there's a lot of intrigue there. So when you say trends, I'm like, that is definitely a trend, but I think definitely money is being poured in, and we're starting to see kind of those outcomes from that.
Well, I have a question, because I'm actually picturing into my crazy mind a vision.
It's not crazy,
where
but go ahead.
no, this is a crazy mind, I can tell. So basically I'm picturing a course where you could, like a medical course where you could do like hair transplant with the augmented reality, so that you like kind of like have in front of you a patient, and then you can figure, like you can see through like the Oculus or whatever that visual thing is, you can see that you're moving and you're like using like the I don't know how the things for the
Scalpel
surgeons are called.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, this is
surgeon
like
stuff.
poor English from my side. I don't know how those are called like specifically. But yeah, like you could cut people, you could like sew them just like in front of your eyes and doing like the hair transplant just like by looking at the virtual reality or like the augmented reality. Like this could be a way how, you know, the medical students could still learn, but not doing that on practice. So it's something in between.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a crazy way. It's a crazy, I mean, for now, it's a crazy way.
No, I mean, they
are
are doing that right now.
Already.
Right? Yeah. That's kind of what I meant about anything that's kind of like ethically dodgy or too risky to do on an actual person while you're still in that learning stage. AR and VR really assist with that. Although, like, I think, right when it first kind of came out, it was still kind of hokey, and it was not, it will never be, well, not never, let's never say never, but as of right now, it's not as true to form, but like completely, there's so many different applications where it might be too risky for you to go into a situation and experience that hands-on. And VR and AR would definitely help in that, and make it more scalable and attainable for people as well, because you don't need a dead body to practice on. You just need the headset.
That's got to be such a stress reduction for the students as well. They're like, oh, Mr. Instructor accidentally cut off this patient's arm. We're can we get a do-over?
Bring it out, please.
You know.
Yeah, but anyways, this is definitely scalable. Like you could do one course and then use it for 100 students or 200 or whatever that is. It's like you expend your resources just like one time, you spend money on one time, but then you can use it like for a long period of time, which is like it's totally affordable and like super, it's just like super useful, I think. When it comes to virtual reality, I'm also thinking about the metaverse, just like my mind goes into it straight immediately. And I know you were referencing like teaching to younger people before. And I was thinking, couldn't like the metaverse be a way to teach to the youngest and, to teach them in an interactive way with gamification so that they could learn more, but maybe like be more distracted. I mean, I'm not sure about this, but if you think about the gamification, of course, you can teach something more to the younger people because they're more into it. Like if you gamify everything, what do you think about it?
I mean, I completely think there's so much potential there. And I kind of wanted to bring up my two friends that work in high school in K-12. And I asked them before this call, I was saying, oh, I'm going to my friend's podcast. They talk about, tech and the intersection of things.
This is so cute of you.
I wanted to ask you. So cute.
I know.
Don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe.
But I asked them, how was it like for you? Because I think in my role, my exposure to students and their experience at the end of the line is pretty limited. I dispense the learning and I kind of submit those evaluations, but beyond that, I'm not speaking to them one-on-one. I'm like in and out every day, and I know the pandemic would definitely have had such a huge effect on them. And I'm just going to read out this quote from my friend because I thought it was particularly striking. And yeah, my friend's name is Erica Thompson. She's a really great math
Hi, Erica.
teacher.
Shout out to
Hi,
you.
Erica. Thank you for helping us. Thank you for
Erica.
Yeah.
So she says, from my K-12 perspective, I'd say that my main takeaway from all of it is the inequity piece. Like, you could have everything that you can to make an effective online or hybrid course, but if students don't have working computers or a room at home of their own to work in, then it doesn't make a difference. I found that kids who did fine at school mostly did fine at home or in our blended model, but the students who already struggled at school due to various reasons fell off the face of the earth during COVID. And then she goes on to say, she goes on to say, depending on age, students have more academic versus more social consequences. So for example, students who are currently in grade 9 are seriously acting out because they missed out on grade 7 and 8, which are vital years for learning leadership skills and how to navigate through high school. Whereas the current 12 seem fine socially because those relationships were already in place when COVID hit, but they have huge gaps academically compared to the usual. And then she also said mental health is shit because of the compounding effects of the pandemic and various
yeah,
other stresses.
That's true. No, she's right.
Oh yeah, totally. But yeah, kind of what I got away from that was, yeah, like it must have been really fucking shit for students, especially students just starting high school and trying to learn how to socialize online. And social learning is such a huge aspect of how we interact with people. And it's like basically the only reason why kids go to school in the first place some of the time, to have those social connections with their friends. True. So when you strip that away, then how can like the incentive to actually learn happen, right? And I like to go back to your question about the metaverse. If I was to think how students of Gen Z interact with each other online, or like, you know, Alessandra Ocasio-Cortez did that Among Us stream, and you know, she's in it with the kids. But
what did she do? I didn't know about it.
She played a video game.
Among Us.
Yes.
Okay, I know that game.
Yeah.
Like, what did she do exactly?
Yeah.
She played it. She streamed it.
She just played it. So okay, so she was in the game.
Well, she streamed it. Yeah. So she.
Oh my
streamed
gosh!
So like a few million people
Twitched it on Twitch.
Yeah, she twitched it.
Oh my god! Okay, that's cool.
So cool.
That's cool. Yeah,
that's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
also, like about the metaverse, I've been checking about this online because of my job, and what I found out last week is that there is a Chinese university that they have recreated on the metaverse, on one Chinese metaverse that now I'm sorry, but I probably will mispronounce the name if I pronounce it. So basically on this metaverse, they have recreated the campus of the Chinese University of Communication, which is a big uni. And they have recreated this campus so that the avatars can just like join the metaverse and like go through the campus and like attend events, take, I don't know, like meetings and coffees and with someone, meeting people. It's basically like a hub where you could meet people, which I think is just like very interesting. But at the same time, the university, as far as I know, they didn't disclose that they actually held classrooms in there. But in the future, I could see that happening. Like, imagine if we have like different, I don't know, like now we are living in pandemic, even though like we are, let's say in the, I would say like in a calm stage of the pandemic right now, because like the now it's kind of stabilized. I hope it will be staying like that, or it will go like even better in the future. But yeah, I mean, like I could see the metaverse being a trend in the next years, and it's already being a trend right now, especially like among Gen Z, as you said before. And like many companies are investing in that. Also, like on the education side, of course, the Chinese are the forefront for it. but I definitely see like American universities and like other unis from all over Europe as well going into there because it's very convenient. If you have to hold a classroom, like having that on the metaverse can be gamified as well. So you could even like teach way better, like teach things better in a better way. If you have a special classroom or if you have like a special designed course, because right now like only the early adopters are using the metaverse, or so the thing is we should have courses on the metaverse like designed better, of course, and then like there will be a massive adoption of it. That's what I think from my side, as this is what happens with every kind of technology. First the early adopters come and then like everyone follows if things get better and of course cheaper and well designed. So I could kind of see that going. And also like you, Ian, you were telling me about the Korean ceremony, right?
Yes. Yeah. So there was a South Korean university. I can't remember what year it was. It was during the pandemic though, that they used Minecraft, which ironically enough, especially I know Raeanne's gonna giggle because in an educational standpoint, it also made a resurgence. Not really in a good setting in the schoolroom, but it made a resurgence nonetheless in the past few years. They hosted an entire opening ceremony for the university inside the video game. And so they had like all few hundred or few thousand of the incoming class. Instead of having to go to campus, they're all like, okay, log into this video game and we're going to do like the whole speech. We're going to do the whole roll call, whatever, introduce you to the campus, which they built in the game, scale to scale. I think it was a 1-to-1 replica. And then you're like, okay, now go break out and just hang out with your cohort, your new classmates in the game. And this was like an official university doing it as well. So I get it's definitely laying the groundworks for things to change. I guess the question is, will these changes stick around, or is it the best direction for education to go?
I mean, that's a good question. It's, it's just one person's opinion, so don't quote me on it, I guess.
Yeah, nobody quote anyone on this, please.
I have a lot of excitement, I think, for the possibility for this kind of thing. Okay. As I said before, I think it could be a massive disruptor in the university space. As I said before, universities are these traditional, old institutions that don't change. And one of the things that they've been holding on to in terms of like their brick and mortar university settings is the fact that students have to come to school if they want that university experience. And if you pay for a online degree, you're missing out on that university experience, which has been so mythologized in just like pop culture. Mm-hmm. So it's really exciting to me to imagine what that university experience, that university social experience could become in something like the metaverse, or if it was gamified. And I think gamification right now is being used a lot, or the term gamification, the trend is being used a lot. But as far as I'm seeing in terms of how they're being adopted in corporations or universities, or they don't really do that much incentive basing for universities because they're like, oh, we'll have your money. You want a degree, you'll have to just work anyway. But gamification there is very much like, oh, you do this thing, you get a badge. You do this thing, you get a badge. Whether, as opposed to kind of structural gamification where you're building a world around that. You're building your learning into that gaming aspect. So I think that is probably the more effective way to retain an engagement, which again, it's key. It's the event in Gagne's 9 Events of Instructions, gaining that kind of attention. And while it's important to kind of state that engagement isn't the full story, I think especially with young people, that's really where you have to start. So I'm not sure how effective it's going to be in imparting learning down the line, but in terms of how it changes the culture and it changes the hold that universities have over people and generating diplomas and being pushed into the workforce. Like what is that going to look like in 20 years? Will you graduating from Harvard or Oxford still carry the same cachet like that it does today, or will you be able to go to some University of, we're going to say University of Arizona like it's a podunk university? It's not. It's they're really innovating right now in terms of their online education, but it is a small university and they're allowed to
we're not
that.
Knocking you at all. If you're listening, please don't sue. No sue, please. No lawsuit.
No, don't sue. But they're really cranking it out, and they really invest a lot of money into it in a way that the university I was working at UBC didn't really at all. They really prioritize that active learning experience of students coming into class. And so when the pandemic hit and they tried to do all these blended models, these hybrid models, they kind of just fell short. So I think universities that are, expecting these disruptions, or institutions that are expecting these disruptions and kind of embracing them and moving forward, those are the ones that are going to actually survive.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. To play also devil's advocate, I mean, the UBC campus is gorgeous.
Cool.
All right. Amanda, do you have any other questions for?
No, actually, my last question would have been, well, how do you see the future of education going? But I think you kind of answered that. So yeah, we toggle it.
Yeah. You see, you had your notes on us so well prepared that you just knew instinctively what questions we were going to ask before we even asked them.
Segue.
Yeah, you answered that before,
Your models are great. That's what we're just saying.
My notes,
because actually she's been studying educational design, so she knew where we were heading to.
It's all about that storytelling, right?
Yeah, it's storytelling. Exactly.
Storytelling.
She knew that.
Ooh. All right. Well, Raeanne, do you have any other words of wisdom, thoughts to leave us on? Any pieces of advice to give our audience out there?
I mean, I would entreat people to consider instructional design as a career choice, especially if I would consider myself to be a lifelong jack of all trades, master of none kind of deal.
You're jack of all trades for sure. You are. You just are. She can do everything. She can even do tattoos, guys. She can do everything. Yeah.
So
I gotta hear this story sometime.
Oh, yeah, Amanda will show you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Raeanne, for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of Unfuck the Internet. Again, we'll definitely be sure to have Raeanne. You're more than welcome to come back and join us at any other time. Thank you all for listening, and we look forward to seeing you all in the next episode.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.